Hello everybody and welcome to another top 5 board gaming video. Today I'm going to be talking all about games that are about animals. But before I get started, if you haven't done so already, please take a look at all of my various social media pages as well as my Patreon page. On all of those you can interact with myself and my channel in a whole bunch of really cool ways. So jumping right into our games for today about animals. What do I mean by that? Well, anything related to animals. We're raising animals, we're seeing animals, we're playing as animals, doing all sorts of that different stuff. The thing is, there are a ton of games that are about animals, either directly or indirectly, and these are my personal favorites. Now, I'm a scientist, so that means that a lot of these games are about essentially learning about how the animals live or how they came about and all of that kind of stuff. But as always, I'm really curious what you all have to say. What are your favorite games about animals and why? Please let me know anything and everything in the comments below. But with that, we're going to get started with my number 5. At number 5, I've got Barron Park. This is a game where essentially you're making a zoo that is exclusively bears. So the idea is that you have to bring in the construction equipment to prepare the land, build up the enclosures, and then you put the bears in. The thing is that most of this game is primarily about building up the actual park and not so much about the bears themselves, but at the same time it just struck me as really fun because it's a game about bears, and that's just not something that you see too frequently. It's really fun, it's a great little Euro game, and it's good for a really fun game night, essentially. Barron Park, my number 5. At number 4, I've got Takenoko. That's right, it's another game about bears, and in this case, specifically about pandas. The thing is, this is higher up on the list because it's more specifically about how pandas live and what you need to do to take care of them and all that kind of stuff. In this case, you're trying to feed the pandas, you gotta grow up all of the bamboo, you gotta make sure that the panda is well fed, and on top of that, the expansion adds a little baby panda, and it is super adorable. The thing is that still abstractly, this game doesn't really work in terms of knowing anything about the biology or anything along those lines, but it's not a big deal. It's still a really fun game. It's absolutely adorable. It's great for kids and adults alike. Takenoko, my number 4. At number 3, I've got Reef, the game about coral and building up a big coral reef and all of that great stuff. Most of you probably aren't aware of this, but I've got a saltwater tank that I have been maintaining for a little bit over a year now, and I love it. Marine biology is something that I've been interested in for a pretty long time, but I've never done a lot with it until recently when I started up the tank. There's a lot to do with chemistry in terms of maintaining the water balance and all of that kind of thing, and of course the biology of the animals that I keep, and that includes corals of all different sorts. The game itself is really fun. It's a really neat little kind of photosynthesis-like game where you're growing up corals in individual sections on a board. It is a little bit niche though, and that's why it's lower on this list, but it is well made, it's a lot of fun, and it's very colorful, of course, as we expect from anything coral related. Reef, my number 3. At number 2, I've got Evolution. This is another entry for me, at least, in terms of how the biology happens and really explaining it in a very good way that is still scientifically accurate. In the case of Evolution, the idea is that you're playing trait cards to indicate what your particular species can and can't do, and you just sort of go from there, and you're competing with the other species around the table, trying to outsmart them, outflank them, get more food, all of that kind of stuff. It's an incredibly well done game. It's very well balanced, and it's a great way to actually start teaching kids about how biology works and the theory of evolution. Not to mention the fact that it has some really great expansions, and in addition, a new sort of version of this game is coming out where it's oceans, and it's going to be all about ocean life and all that kind of stuff, so I'm super excited to see that. Plus, Evolution, the video game, was also recently released, so there's a lot of great options for this. Evolution, my number 2. At number 1, I've got Wingspan, the game that has taken the gaming community by storm. This is a game that was released very, very recently and is about ornithology of all things. That is to say, it's about birds. But the thing is that it was actually designed by an ornithologist. I believe they are a professor, if I'm not mistaken, and it is incredibly scientifically accurate, but the game is fun. It's an absolute blast. It's a joy to play, but the thing is that you learn actual scientific information about birds and how they migrate and how they mate and how they do all of this different stuff. And when you're talking about somebody who is a scientist designing a game about science that ends up being very fun mechanically, From my perspective, you just cannot go wrong. Wingspan by a large span is my number one. Well, everybody, that's going to be it for me. I hope that you enjoyed this video on my top 5 favorite games about animals. Like I said at the beginning, this is obviously biased a little bit towards the idea that I am a scientist. I'm a biologist, and so I love to see games that incorporate that in some way, whether it's scientifically accurate information or just seeing the biological procedurals that are occurring, whether in the short or the long term. That is what I absolutely love to see. But with that, I want to hear what you all have to say. What do you consider a game about animals? Do you consider any game with animals about animals? And of course, what are your personal favorites? Please let me know anything and everything you think in the comments below, because you guys know I love to hear from you. But with that, thank you very, very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time.